I wasn't supposed to wake up. That's the first thought I remember, thick and heavy in my chest when the machines around me beeped just a little louder than they had the day before. The second thought came with the sting of reality. They really did leave me. My body felt like someone else's. Wires in my arms, a weight on my chest, a dull ache in my head that pulsed with each breath. The room was white, too white, like a space between life and death where no one planned to stay long. I didn't know how many days had passed. I only knew I was still here, and someone didn't want me to be. They thought I couldn't hear them. I wish they were right. Somewhere between the coma and consciousness, there were voices. They'd drift in and out like echoes underwater. But one night, or day, I don't even know which, it became clear. My mother's voice, controlled, crisp. "She's not really ours. We raised her. Yes, but we've done our part. It's time to let her go." Then my father, "She wouldn't want to live like this. She's always been different." Different. That word had followed me like a shadow since I was 6. Back when I built a wind-powered water pump from spare parts in our garage, and my mom told me to stop wasting time and go help your sister with her piano lesson. In that hospital bed, I finally understood the truth I'd been too afraid to name. I wasn't their daughter. Not really. I was their obligation, their inconvenience, their mistake. And when life gave them a chance to be free of me, they took it. But the universe wasn't done with me. I remember the nurse. Her name was Maribel. She had soft hands and a voice like warm tea. She talked to me even when no one else did. She brushed my hair, adjusted my blankets, whispered to me about the sunrise I couldn't see. "You're not gone," she said once, her fingers lightly touching mine. "I feel it. You're still here." She was right. That morning when I finally opened my eyes and the world snapped into sharp, sterile focus, she was the first face I saw. Her gasp turned into a sob, and she ran out of the room calling for a doctor. The room flooded with voices and light and movement. But I didn't care about any of that. I only wanted to know one thing. Where were they? Maribel avoided my question at first. But I kept asking. I needed to know how long I'd been unconscious, who had visited, what they had said, and when she told me, hesitantly, gently, that my parents had only come once, 3 days after the accident, and signed a DNR form just in case, my breath caught in my throat. She said they'd talked with the doctors privately and left. No phone calls, no checking in, no prayers by my bedside. Nothing. It wasn't an accident, it was a choice. They let me die. I didn't cry, not then, not when the truth landed like a blade in my chest. I just stared at the ceiling, blinking slowly, as if tears might make it real. But the pain wasn't sharp, it was numb, like grief that had calcified into something harder. They gave up on me, but I didn't give up on myself. Something inside me began to shift that day, not out of rage, not yet, but a kind of quiet resolve, a seed of clarity. If they didn't want me in their world, I would build my own, and I would make sure they knew it. Not through screams, not through vengeance, through truth, through something they couldn't twist. I didn't know then how. My body was weak, my hands trembled, and my voice cracked like dry wood. But my mind was on fire. I just needed time. I've always known I was a shadow in my own house. Not the haunting kind. No, shadows don't scream or break things or draw attention. They're just there. Quiet, polite, easy to overlook. And that's exactly what I became in the Whitman household. My earliest memory isn't of a birthday or a trip to the zoo. It's of my mother brushing my sister's hair in the living room while I stood behind the couch, holding a drawing I'd made of our family. Except, in my version, I wasn't in it. Maybe I knew even then. My sister, June, was perfect. Not in a mean girl way, she was genuinely sweet, always smiling, always doing what was expected. She played piano, she danced, she got straight A's without trying. She made our parents proud simply by existing. I, on the other hand, was complicated. I liked questions more than answers. I took apart the toaster to see how heat worked. I asked my science teacher why human hearts break, not just biologically but metaphorically. I built things. I wrote things. I cared more about ideas than appearances. And in a family where image was everything, that made me the problem. Dinner conversations were interviews, June's new recital, June's SAT prep, June's boyfriend from the right kind of family. I would speak up sometimes about the biology club, about my prototype that extracted blood glucose non-invasively using infrared, My dad would just nod distractedly and say, "That's interesting, honey," which was code for "we don't get it and we don't want to." So I learned to keep things to myself. When I was 15, I snuck into a local college seminar on emerging biotech and met a guest lecturer named Dr. Kamal. He was the first adult who looked me in the eye and said, "You think fast, you should keep going." He gave me his card. I never used it, but I still have it. By 17, I had built a basic model of a biosensor that could potentially revolutionize how type 1 diabetes was managed. I emailed a dozen professors about it. Only one replied. He said it was promising, but unrealistic. Still, he said it politely, and that meant something. I never told my parents. What would have been the point? They saw me as someone smart enough to be strange, but not successful. Creative, but chaotic. A good essay writer maybe, but not good enough to get into the Ivies. Certainly not compared to June. The funny thing is, I didn't want fame. I didn't want the stage. I just wanted to be seen. Really seen. Not as June's weird older sister, not as a side project, not as an inconvenience they never truly claimed. But the house had its rules. June got praise, I got quiet looks. June got hugs at the door, I got checklists. June got the family ring when Grandma passed away. I got a polite reminder to not make the funeral about myself. When I started college, state school, on a scholarship, I called home every Sunday. Most times no one answered. Sometimes they forgot I was calling. Other times, June would pick up and say, "Mom's busy, but she says hi." Eventually, I stopped trying, but I never stopped building. I kept refining my sensor project. Took electives in biophysics and AI modeling, stayed late in labs, worked 2 jobs to fund the materials. My dorm was cluttered with wires, prototypes, test kits. No one saw it but me. It was like building a secret life, a life where I mattered. And maybe that's why when the accident happened, when the car spun and the world went dark, I shouldn't have been surprised they gave up so quickly. I was never really part of their plan, but they weren't part of mine either. Not anymore. When your own parents sign off on your death, there's a certain clarity that settles in. It's not panic, not even grief. It's a cold, precise silence that wraps around your thoughts like gauze. You stop asking why, you start asking what now. And what I wanted, what I needed, was to leave something behind, something they couldn't control, something they wouldn't expect. It was Maribel again who brought me the pen. She shouldn't have. It wasn't in the protocol for a patient just off ventilator support to be writing. But when I looked at her with what little strength I had and whispered, "Please, paper," she didn't ask questions, she just brought it. It took me over an hour to write the whole thing. My hand shook like a leaf in a hurricane, but I did it. Every word mattered. Every sentence had weight. This wasn't a goodbye letter. This was a record. A statement. A declaration of truth from a girl they wanted erased. I started with facts. The date of the accident. The names of the doctors I'd overheard. The timeline of when my parents arrived and when they left. The words I'd heard them say. Then I got personal. "I am not unconscious," I wrote. "I am awake. I heard what they said. I know what they signed." I detailed everything I remembered from the hospital room. The sound of my mother's heels walking away, the soft click of the door, the way the lights dimmed after they left. I wrote it all. Because maybe someday, someone would question what happened to me, and when they did, I wanted proof. Then, finally, I added the piece that would change everything. The will. My grandmother, the only person who'd ever made me feel like I truly belonged somewhere, had updated her will 6 months before she died. I knew because I helped her draft it. She trusted me more than she trusted her own children. She said it herself. "You're the only one who listens, Darcy. The others, they just nod and wait for me to finish." She had wanted to leave most of her estate to causes that mattered to her. STEM scholarships for girls, hospice care, community science labs. But she also wanted someone in the family to be the executor, to ensure it wasn't all whitewashed or redirected through lawyers. She chose me. She even gave me a notarized copy, just in case. "You're my insurance policy," she laughed. That copy was still in my college dorm drawer when the accident happened. They didn't know about it, they'd written me off. And yet, I was the one holding the match they didn't know existed. I wrote the details of the will into the letter. Who the beneficiaries were, what clauses existed, and most importantly, the clause that stated, If the primary executor is declared deceased or legally incapacitated, a full reevaluation of all inheritors is required, and no direct lineal descendant may serve as automatic replacement. In other words, if they tried to pretend I was dead, they couldn't take over in my place. I signed the letter, shaky, but clear. And then I asked Maribel to do one last thing, mail it, to the name on the back. It was a backup lawyer, a friend of my grandmother's, not listed on any family documentation. I'd scribbled the name, Esther Clark ESQ, in pencil on the back of the envelope. Maribel hesitated. "Are you sure?" I looked at her. For once, I didn't feel like a patient. I felt like someone who had just taken back control of her life. "Yes." She tucked it into her scrubs, and I leaned back in the bed, letting the exhaustion take me. I didn't know what would happen next, whether I'd live long enough to see the ripple, whether the letter would even matter. But I knew one thing for certain: I was not going to disappear quietly. The thing about being forgotten is, it gives you options. No one's watching, no one's waiting. You can become whoever you want when no one remembers who you were. After I was discharged, I didn't go back to my old dorm. I didn't call my friends. I didn't even log into my email. I became a ghost. I chose a new city, a quiet name, and a life that didn't require explanation. And they never looked for me. Not once. I'd left the letter behind, of course. And like a stone dropped into still water, I knew it would send ripples. But I needed distance to watch them unfold. So I rented a one-room studio above a laundromat and worked nights transcribing medical records, ironically typing up the lives of people still being seen, still being saved. During the days I finished what I started, my biosensor prototype, the real one. It took months of trial and error. I burned my fingertips on soldering tools, slept 3 hours a night, ate whatever I could afford. But the design came together, piece by obsessive piece. When I finally ran a test on myself, and it worked, I cried for the first time since the accident. Not because I was proud, because I was real again. Then one morning, my prepaid phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe. A clipped voice said, "This is Clark & Lyons Estate Law. Miss Darcy Whitman, are you available to confirm a document submitted in your name regarding the Whitman inheritance proceedings?" I froze. They had received the letter. And now they knew I wasn't dead. I didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at the wall, my breath shallow. The voice continued, "Your family is currently contesting the validity of the clause in your grandmother's will. They claim you are deceased and therefore ineligible." I finally found my words. "Do you need me to prove otherwise?" A pause. "Only if you'd like to appear." I almost laughed. That "if" held a world of choice, and I knew exactly what to do with it. A week later, the will was read in a polished room of cherrywood panels and too much cologne. I didn't attend, but my name did. I watched from outside the building across the street in a borrowed car, wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie. I saw them walk in, my father in his tailored black suit, like he was attending a red carpet. My mother, perfectly composed in designer morning wear, June trailing behind, looking smaller than I remembered. They looked like a family grieving. They were not. Inside, I imagined the lawyer, Esther, clearing her throat, then reading the words I once helped write. The surprise was never meant to be the money. It was my existence. They had wagered everything on my silence, on the hope that I had vanished for good, that I had stayed in the coma, that I had never mailed the letter, that even if I had, no one would believe me. But the will had one condition they couldn't rewrite. All named beneficiaries must be confirmed living and of sound mind before transfer of funds. And my name? Darcy Whitman. I was listed first. They must have panicked. I almost felt bad for them, watching the mask of control crack as the truth began to seep in. Almost. But then I remembered that they signed the papers that would have let me die. So, no sympathy. I didn't go inside that day, didn't need to. But I left behind a package with Esther, the lawyer. Inside, the working prototype of my biosensor, the patent application, the early clinical trial data, and a note. My parents saw no value in me alive. Maybe now they'll learn what they missed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted them to sit with the weight of what they had thrown away, and it was only just beginning. They thought they had won. The mahogany conference room buzzed with shallow grief and eager anticipation. My parents sat side by side, clasped hands, resting on a stack of prepared documents. June, quiet as always, sat with her chin tilted downward, eyes unmoving. It wasn't sadness, it was strategy. No one cries before a will is read, especially when they think it's theirs. The lawyer, Esther Clark, tapped a pen against her legal pad. She was older than I remembered. Sharper, too. There was a stillness to her posture, like she knew something no one else in the room did. Because she did. She had my letter, she had my instructions, and she had the final say. Before we proceed with the standard reading of Margaret Whitman's final will and testament, she began, the decedent has requested that a video be played for all named parties present. A slight murmur swept through the room. My father shifted in his seat. A video? They didn't expect that. The screen lowered behind her, the lights dimmed. And then, there I was, alive, calm, looking straight into the camera with eyes they hadn't seen in nearly a year. "Hi," I said in the video. "If you're watching this, then you've probably come here expecting a windfall." My voice didn't shake, my hair was shorter, my face thinner, but I was undeniably me. "Let me save you some time. Yes, I'm alive. No, you didn't mishear that." I paused, smiled. "And no, this isn't a prank. This is my legacy." My mother gasped. My father swore under his breath. June didn't move. I was in that hospital bed for 9 days. 9, during which my parents visited once. And on that visit, they signed a DNR. Said I wasn't worth the effort, that I wasn't really theirs. I saw it in their faces. Pure, raw panic. The room was silent, but the air turned heavy. I heard every word, and I wrote everything down. Esther paused the video briefly to hold up a document. "This," she said, "is the notarized, handwritten account Darcy left while in care, which was delivered to this office under her own signature and verified by hospitals." My parents' lawyer stood to object, but she silenced him with a flick of her wrist. "We're not done." Back to the video. My grandmother knew how this might play out. That's why she amended the will last year. "Not only am I the primary executor, but 75% of her estate is left to me, conditional on my survival." I wanted them to sit with the weight of what they had thrown away, and it was only just beginning. They thought they had won. The mahogany conference room buzzed with shallow grief and eager anticipation. My parents sat side by side, clasped hands resting on a stack of prepared documents. June, quiet as always, sat with her chin tilted downward, eyes unmoving. It wasn't sadness, it was strategy. No one cries before a will is read, especially when they think it's theirs. The lawyer, Esther Clark, tapped a pen against her legal pad. She was older than I remembered, sharper too. There was a stillness to her posture, like she knew something no one else in the room did. Because she did. She had my letter, she had my instructions, and she had the final say. Before we proceed with the standard reading of Margaret Whitman's final will and testament, she began, the decedent has requested that a video be played for all named parties present. A slight murmur swept through the room. My father shifted in his seat. A video? They didn't expect that. The screen lowered behind her, the lights dimmed, and then, there I was, alive, calm, looking straight into the camera with eyes they hadn't seen in nearly a year. "Hi," I said in the video. "If you're watching this, then you've probably come here expecting a windfall." My voice didn't shake, my hair was shorter, my face thinner, but I was undeniably me. "Let me save you some time. Yes, I'm alive. No, you didn't mishear that." I paused, smiled. "And no, this isn't a prank, this is my legacy." My mother gasped, my father swore under his breath. June didn't move. I was in that hospital bed for 9 days, 9, during which my parents visited once, and on that visit they signed a DNR, said I wasn't worth the effort, that I wasn't really theirs. I saw it in their faces, pure raw panic. The room was silent, but the air turned heavy. I heard every word, and I wrote everything down. Esther paused the video briefly to hold up a document. "This," she said, "is the notarized handwritten account Darcy left while in care, which was delivered to this office under her own signature and verified by hospital staff." My parents' lawyer stood to object, but she silenced him with a flick of her wrist. "We're not done." Back to the video. My grandmother knew how this might play out. That's why she amended the will last year. "Not only am I the primary executor, but 75% of her estate is left to me, conditional on my survival." The silence shattered. 75%. And since I am very much alive, the condition has been fulfilled. I paused again, leaned closer to the camera. "But don't worry, I'm not keeping all of it." Their eyes lit up. "Hope." Maybe I had found forgiveness. Maybe I'd let them back in. Then I said, I've already set up a STEM scholarship foundation in Grandma's name. Most of the estate will go to that. To girls like me, quiet ones, misfit ones, the ones you overlook. Pause. Oh, and one more thing. Esther stopped the tape again, cleared her throat. There's a sealed letter for each of you. Darcy's final words, individually addressed. She handed them out like tiny bombs. My father opened his immediately. My mother hesitated. June didn't touch hers. In my father's envelope was a photo of my hospital room, dated, a copy of the DNR, a post-it note attached. This is how much you cared. My mother's envelope held a single sentence. You loved silence more than me, so I've given it back to you, permanently. June's was blank. She and I had always been complicated. No cruelty, no love, just distance. I let her choose what came next. As Esther packed up the documents, she added one final note. Darcy has officially declined all further contact. I watched them file out from my vantage point across the street. None of them looked back. For the first time in my life, they finally knew how that felt. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. People expect you to want blood after a betrayal like that. They wait for a courtroom showdown, a viral confrontation, screaming matches in parking lots. But I wasn't interested in spectacle. I just wanted to be seen, fully, finally, on my own terms. The news of the will reading spread faster than I expected. Maybe someone inside the law office leaked it. Maybe it was one of my parents. Or maybe it was the sheer novelty of the headline. Presumed deceased heir returns to claim inheritance and outs family betrayal in video confession. Whatever the cause, by the next week my inbox was full. Journalists, podcast producers, people from high school I hadn't spoken to in years, even a few professors who suddenly always believed in me. Funny how survival changes your value. I didn't respond to most of it. I wasn't looking for 15 minutes of fame. I was building something far more lasting. A month after the will reading, I launched the Whitman Initiative, named not after my family but after my grandmother. A STEM incubator for underrepresented girls in science, built using the bulk of my inheritance. It made the front page of 3 tech journals and landed me a panel invite at a global biotech conference in DC. I said yes, and that's where they saw me again, in person. My father was there. He was on a different panel about family legacy and business. Irony doesn't get more poetic than that. He spotted me in the lobby, surrounded by a few journalists, shaking hands with an investor who looked half amazed to meet me. His face froze. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. Just standing there in a tailored suit with my name on the event banner was enough. He knew. Everyone knew. The dead girl came back. Only she wasn't dead. She was thriving. Later, I found out my mother had given a tearful interview to a lifestyle magazine about losing touch with her daughter after a terrible accident. She painted herself as misunderstood, heartbroken, eager to rebuild our unbreakable bond. She even mentioned June, who by then had removed Whitman from all her professional bios. I didn't respond. I didn't need to clarify anything. The truth had already done that for me. But June surprised me. One morning, I received a handwritten card, just my name, no return address. Inside it said, "You always scared me, not because of who you were, but because I knew you'd never need them the way I did." That was it. But somehow it was enough. I didn't know what she meant to do with her life, whether she'd stay or finally step away. But in that one sentence, she gave me something our parents never could. Honesty. As for me, I kept working. The biosensor I'd once built in a dorm closet became a flagship product at a new startup I co-founded. We got funding, we got press. But more than anything, we got results. Better monitoring, better access, and lives improved by something born out of silence and dismissal. I no longer hid behind borrowed names. I was Darcy Whitman. And this time, the name meant something because I defined it. Not them. People kept asking me the same thing after everything came out. Do you feel like you got your revenge? And my answer, always, was no. Because revenge implies I wanted to hurt them, that I wanted them to suffer the way I did. But the truth is, I didn't care enough about them to make them the center of my ending. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't require proof. That isn't built on winning, or punishing, or getting the last word. I wanted to be untethered from their voices in my head, from the fear that maybe they were right about me, from the part of myself that still flinched at kindness. And slowly, I found it. It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. But one morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them at all the day before. That's when I knew I was free. Not because I'd erased the past, but because it no longer owned me. I kept building the initiative, kept showing up in rooms where people still underestimated me, but no longer out of cruelty, just ignorance. And I could live with that, because now when I spoke, people listened. And more importantly, I listened to myself. I kept Esther on as my legal advisor. Not because I needed her anymore, but because I wanted to be the kind of person who builds lasting loyalty, not transactional bonds. I sent Maribel a scholarship in her name too. She never asked for anything. She just did the right thing, quietly. I figured the world could use more women like her. As for my parents, I don't know what they're doing now. Sometimes I get updates. They tried to sue for emotional distress. The case didn't go far. Public sympathy wasn't on their side. They're living somewhere in Connecticut now, I think. Still throwing dinner parties. Still pretending nothing ever cracked beneath the surface. And that's fine. They're allowed to pretend. Just not in my life. I returned to the hospital once. The same room, same floor. The nurse's station still had that slow, steady rhythm. I stood there for a while, just watching, breathing. Maribel wasn't on shift that day, but I left a note for her. It simply said, "You were the first person who saw me." I meant it. Later that night, I walked down to the waterfront, the same spot I used to go to as a teenager when everything felt too loud. I sat on the edge, watching boats drift quietly under a purpling sky, and I thought to myself, I'm still here. That line used to be defiant, a scream into the void. Now it's just a truth. A quiet one. I am still here, and I don't need anyone to be sorry for that. You'd think freedom would feel loud, like fireworks, or a standing ovation, or a door slamming shut behind you with finality, but it doesn't. It feels like walking down a quiet street at 6 a.m., barefoot in your own kitchen, drinking tea without bracing for a conversation that might hurt you. It's the sound of your own breath when there's nothing left to prove. 6 months after the will was finalized, I moved again, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't need to be close to my past anymore. I found a converted farmhouse in Vermont, surrounded by wild grass and trees older than my last name, the kind of place where no one asked questions when you said, I just needed space. I built a small lab on the property. Nothing flashy, just enough to tinker. Some days I still wake up with ideas that pull me out of bed like gravity. I don't ignore them anymore. I don't tell myself they're silly or too much. I follow them. Sometimes June writes. Not often. Just a few lines on old stationery. Always unsigned. Once she sent me a quote, "Forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past." Lily Tomlin. I didn't know if it was meant for me or for her. Maybe both. I never replied, not because I didn't want to, but because some things are better left as quiet bridges, suspended, untouched, but there if needed. A year to the day after the video was played, Esther called me. "There's something you should see," she said. I assumed it was legal. Another challenge, maybe. But when I met her in the city, she handed me a thick envelope instead. On the front was a return address I hadn't seen in over a decade. It was from my grandmother. Apparently, she had written it before she passed. Given it to Esther under the instruction, only give it to Darcy once she chooses herself, not her family. Inside was a handwritten letter, her familiar, looping cursive. I knew one day you'd be forced to make a choice. I'm sorry it had to hurt so much, but I always believed in the girl who saw how things worked, not just machines but people. You didn't just survive, darling, you made meaning out of pain. That's more than I ever did. And I'm so proud of you. Always have been. Even when you didn't look up. Even when you thought no one saw. I cried. Harder than I ever did for my parents. Because grief, when it's mixed with love, is heavier than rage, but it's also warmer. I keep the letter in my nightstand now. Some days, when I doubt myself, when I fall back into old patterns, wondering if I've done enough, become enough, I read it again. Not to remember her, to remember me. That scared, invisible girl with big dreams and trembling hands who didn't give up, who wrote her truth when she had nothing else left, who left a letter instead of a will to die. She saved me, and I live for her now. If you made it to this part of the story, I want to say something simple. Thank you. Not just for reading, but for holding space for someone like me. For every version of you who's ever felt discarded, misunderstood, underestimated, unloved, you are not alone, you are not too much, and you are not a mistake. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear which part stayed with you most. Drop it below, and if someone you know needs a reason to keep going, maybe share this. We all deserve a chance to come back from the dead and finally become whole.